what business is human managed into? This is a question which I keep getting most of the times when I go introduce myself as founder. So when I tell them that we are in the business of intelligence, this is the look I get. What do you mean intelligence? Aren't you a HR company? So I spend the rest of the time explaining what we mean by intelligence. And I always realize that I created more questions than answers. Isn't that the point of intelligence? Which is you always come up with more questions, try to find those answers. So the next 18 minutes, we will try to find those answers. So I'm going to go through the background, the problem, what we mean by collective intelligence, the solution which we have put together, the architecture which it has been built on, and lastly, I will conclude there. So I'm not talking about AI, not yet. It's TI, so threat intelligence. So let me explain, break it down. The intelligence business, which is cyber threat intelligence. Yeah, that's a lot of acronyms. Threat intelligence platform, external attack surface management, and digital risk protection. So the intelligence in the cybersecurity is fragmented, and this is broken down into these four. When you actually subscribe or purchase these solutions, you get these IP addresses, IOC collections. These are basically feeds. And when we talk about feeds, these are called intelligence feeds. And these feeds are not intelligence. They are actually a source through which like you generate intelligence. What does Gartner say about it? Exactly the same. So there is data, there is information, there is knowledge. And once you actually establish a different type of like context which applies to your business, that is when it becomes intelligence. Where do you apply these intelligence? So you can take these intelligence, the feed, and like apply to your threat detection solution. You can use this as part of your incident response, threat hunting, as well as exposure management. These are again like a totally different type of solutions which you have in the cybersecurity. Now, intelligence feeds are events. Now you have it. What do you do with it? See, you integrate them with these different solutions, which is SIEM, XDR, SOAR, and third-party risk management. And the promise of a threat intelligence platform is to ensure that all of this actually happens and like you're able to orchestrate this intelligence to generate something which is of use for your business. And what do you get? As part of threat detection, you get detection enrichments, which is like you, as soon as a detection comes out of a threat detection solution, you need to understand more context about it. Then you could generate detection rules which will find more information about what that intelligence is talking about. Incident response, you're talking about the response playbooks which you have. And then there is the response runbooks, playbooks, workflow, runbook, actions. Then threat hunting. You have found something, you're not pretty sure about what it is. So how do you create a query? You do not know how to create a query. So this is something which can help you, provide you with a query, which tells you this is what you need to run to look for. You can build different use cases based on that. And lastly, how exposed are you? Are there any controls which are out there which can help you with it? And lastly, if you do not have the controls, what compensation controls which you could put together? Now, these are like the different type of ideas which is actually being pitched out there. Now, this is exactly the market. I've just like tried to compress a lot of information about the threat intelligence business and like just given you a TLDR. It's a pretty long TLDR. So what is the problem? There is not a single TI source which can actually help you combine and present you all this information for you to generate intelligence. So this is a pretty broad market. This is what Gartner is saying. And then you have AI, which creates more confusion rather than clarity. So this is exactly where we are. It creates noise and makes it more difficult to find true intelligence. And then there is this concept of collective intelligence, which I'm talking about today. What does that mean? It is trying to find this answer together, not like in a siloed manner. But this is something which already exists. There is this concept of threat intelligence sharing. And how do we share intelligence without revealing too much? So, this is again a recommendation which is coming from multiple different analysts, but yet this is something which hasn't actually evolved the way we would like it to, because sharing isn't easy. So, why is it hard? Because I'm going to go from the bottom to the top, which is interoperability. An intelligence which is created has to be shared across multiple different businesses and industries. And it has to follow exactly the same language. Then the agility. Once it is generated, you need to figure out a way to actually use this as part of your operations and then detect. Then, how relevant it is to your business. Then, if you are in the process of consuming, this is fine. But what if you're in the process of producing? Then you need to take care of privacy. And lastly, how can you use it and make your team use it? Now, that's the solution which we are going to talk about in the next few slides. So, Sticks version 2.1 has already identified how you can structure the data. Then we talk about a concept called nano models, which I will go a little deeper into. Then context model, federated learning, as well as AI native apps. So we are looking at establishing a data structure, making sure there are like models which are created specifically for detecting without false positives, making it stick to your business through the business context. How do you do and how do you constantly learn from this without sending data or storing data centrally? And lastly, how do you interact with these data? So, when we talk about intelligence, what has happened there is it's a collection of database. It's a collection of knowledge, which is what we have. Intelligence is always about connecting the different database. It is like how you connect, how you establish a link, a relationship between the different data points which you have and make sense with it. And that is exactly what we are going to focus on. So, when we talk about how to structure data, we already have Sticks, which has broken down all these different data into specific schemas. We do not have to reinvent this. We can expand more, exactly focusing on the same schema. Then you have these observables, which helps you look at what are the assets which you need to monitor and what are the different type of attributes. You can expand that as well. Then, what are these nano models which I keep talking about? These are very simple detection rules, which, like all those different correlation rules which you're talking about, what if like there is a model which creates all these different rules for you? So these are basically the nano models which can go and like create very specific insights once data is sent to it. So you could look into posture, the compromised behavior, malware, phishing. All the different vendors are already creating these rules. So we do not have to reinvent this as well. So what data is sent to these nano models so that you could generate these outputs? So these are the every single controls, every single cybersecurity tool which you have deployed in your infrastructure is actually the data source for this. They generate events which you could actually look and generate intelligence out of it. So what does it actually look like? So once you have a cloud security posture and then you have a nano model on top of that, it actually breaks down into multiple different objects, multiple different intel, which can be cataloged, stored for future analysis. So what we could do with that, we could identify, catalog it, create an insight in terms of like how many times a specific IP address or a specific vulnerability has been seen in your infrastructure. So this is something which you could first identify, collect it, and catalog it. This is information which is important. So now you have stored this information. What do you do next? So you can establish those different relationships to see how these interactions between these different objects which you have collected. So these are the different type of data attributes and objects which establishes those relationships. And within just establishing the relationship in a particular asset, you can also start thinking about like those interactions which happen across multiple different assets. So now you have identified the different behavior which happens in your infrastructure, the different posture which happens in your infrastructure. The next is, how do you establish a business process with it? So there you are trying to understand the different type of assets, the configuration, the change, the different type of suppliers. So all this information is lying in your business somewhere. All this is like in some digital format. Digital transformation is already transform all these processes digitally. So it's already generating the data which can be collected, and you could push it through a different type of a model. So this is basically going to be your data source. You could provide all these information which is available. Once you have this, you could do exactly the same thing. But rather than identifying a specific behavior or a posture, you're looking at it more from a business point of view. How important is this asset? Does it have confidential information? Does it have sensitive information? Once you have this, you could establish those relationships and see how it actually looks like. So different businesses will have different type of relationships. A financial business industry will have a different type of how they operate. Healthcare, the same. Government, the same. But the data which it generates is always going to be at an atomic level, an indicator, an observable, which you could collect and then establish this information. So now you have this context. Where it actually helps is about how do I share this information, all this intel which you have created, so that you could jointly see. So you have a problem. If someone actually has a solution for it, this is exactly how you could establish it. There are multiple different entities which has all these private data set which you have collected. Now you could actually push it through those different models which you have just created, and then that creates a model. So rather than sending the data to create this model, what we are saying is, let the model come to your infrastructure. This way, the data never leaves your infrastructure. And once you have created a very specific model for your business, you could share it with the privacy preserving technology. So in this case, all you're doing is sending out the model without your data. There is no PII information on this. It goes out, and then where you have this is it gets aggregated at a central place. The model gets aggregated, so everybody's learning, individual learning becomes a combined learning, becomes a collective learning. And once you have this, you could actually share the information which is like across your industry, across your group, across your different business unit, and then have a very clear understanding of what happens in the business. So now you have collected all this information. It is still in the data format. You still need to interact with it. So you could create a web app where you could enable privacy, enable sharing. So this ways, whatever information, whatever intel which you have generated can actually be shared to the community, which can benefit out of it. Yes, you could enable AI as well, and then you could create an LLM app out of it, ask questions, so that it provides you, your data tells you what your status looks like. And all of this is completely automated. Now, this might look like what is a novel technology, but I also have the reference architecture of like how human managed has already built this. So we have broken this down into multiple different stacks, which actually has different layers, as you saw. So you have the hardware stack, which is you could build this on any cloud. So this is like multi-cloud, cloud native, and you can also build it on-prem. Then the different software, which actually is like the different controls which you have deployed in your infrastructure. This is the one which generates the data. Then you have the data stack. This is where the collection, the storage, and the integration with your infrastructure happens. And then you have the AI stack, which is Intel stack, which is where like you build the federated learning, you develop the models, which is very specific to you, so that you could use this for distribution. And lastly, you have the app stack. This is exactly where you interact with the data, which you have processed. So what it would look like is an entity generates, can enter at different level. So you can enter at the infrastructure level or at the data level or at the software level, depends on like at which maturity you are. And all of this information can actually be made available in the infrastructure which you already have the data in. The data doesn't have to leave the infrastructure. And once that happens, once you have established the entire different stack, which I just talked about, a threat, when someone or some attacker enters your infrastructure, that actually gets shared with the PII and the privacy information preserved. And then it generates a different type of intelligence so others can benefit out of it. So participation is key on this, but what is also helpful here is if you have a problem and if someone else has a solution, this is exactly how the collaboration can happen. So I'm quickly going to conclude what I have just spoken about. So if there are 5 things which I could talk about today, it is a model is, I talk a lot about models. A model is an interpretation of your current and the future state. So once you actually have the historical information on it, it is going to help you in terms of what your future is going to look like. The objective of the information is to create a model. So irrespective of whether you're talking about AI or like chess rules, you are going to create a model out of it. The objective of the event is to update the model. So this is the concept behind security information and event management, SIEM. It's a combination of information and event. When that actually happens, that is when intelligence is actually born. So intelligence, when shared, improves decisions. So coming back to the questions which I was talking about, this will create more questions, but it's easier to answer these questions collectively. So the future of intelligence is collective, and the learning process of the machine is always human managed. Now, this is basically what I tell about the company when somebody asks which business human managed is in. This is what we do, and my team will be here. If you would like to know more about this, they would be happy to walk you through in terms of like how intelligence can be shared.